The night before the attack was eerily quiet. Ukrainian soldiers stationed near the Dnipro front line had grown used to the sounds of distant artillery. But that night, the horizon glowed red for a different reason. Satellite alerts began flooding in. Russian armored columns were moving, dozens of them. The number shocked even the most experienced officers. 157 tanks, an entire armored division, heading straight toward a Ukrainian base that guarded a vital supply corridor. Inside the base, alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled from their bunks, pulling on gear, grabbing rifles, loading ammunition. Commanders barked orders into radios. Drones were launched into the cold, dark air. On the screens inside the operations tent, dots began to appear, hundreds of heat signatures moving like a tide. The message was clear: the storm was coming. By dawn, the sky was thick with the sound of engines. Russian T-72s and T-90s advanced in formation, their barrels pointing forward like spears. Dust clouds rose behind them as the earth trembled beneath their weight. Ukrainian scouts watched from forward observation posts, transmitting live coordinates. Artillery crews adjusted their sights, fingers hovering over triggers. Wait, came the order from command, let them come closer. The first shells exploded just as the tanks entered the open valley. Fire erupted across the line. Ukrainian artillery batteries unleashed a storm of steel, their shells raining down like thunder. Explosions tore through the front of the column, flipping several tanks into the air. But the Russian formation kept advancing. They had numbers, armor, and momentum. Inside the Ukrainian base, chaos turned into discipline. Anti-tank teams took positions. Javelin launchers locked onto targets. A squad of engineers activated remote mines hidden under the dirt road, and the ground itself exploded beneath the lead tanks. Flames shot high into the air. The roar of engines turned into screams of metal. Still, they came. More tanks pushed forward, crushing debris, their turrets firing shells toward Ukrainian fortifications. Each explosion shook the bunkers. One Ukrainian soldier later said, "It felt like the earth itself was fighting." Drones hovered above the battlefield, streaming live footage to commanders. They watched as wave after wave of Russian armor entered the kill zone. The second phase began precision strikes. Ukrainian Bayraktar drones launched missiles from above, targeting the weakest points on the tanks. One by one, they burst into flames, their ammunition cooking off in massive fireballs. The sound was deafening, but even as some tanks burned, others pushed deeper into the perimeter. Russian infantry followed close behind, pouring out from armored carriers, firing rifles and RPG. The battle turned into brutal, close-quarter combat. Machine gun fire echoed through the ruins. Smoke and dust covered everything. Soldiers could barely see 10 meters ahead. Radios crackled with overlapping voices, calls for reinforcements, medical requests, coordinates for air support. Then, in the middle of the chaos, a new sound cut through the noise, the whine of engines from above. Ukrainian fighter jets streaked through the clouds. Moments later, guided bombs fell with deadly precision. Massive explosions ripped through the Russian rear lines. Columns of black smoke rose high into the morning sky. What had begun as a coordinated armored assault was now disintegrating into confusion and panic. On the ground, Ukrainian special forces moved like shadows. They flanked the Russian units from the forest line, launching ambushes from unexpected angles. RPG and anti-tank grenades turned more steel giants into burning wrecks. A captured radio transmission revealed the panic in the Russian command. "We're surrounded, we're losing vehicles fast." Within 3 hours, the battlefield looked like a scene from another world. Dozens of Russian tanks lay destroyed, some still burning, others abandoned. Ukrainian troops advanced through smoke, clearing trenches and rescuing wounded comrades. The base had held barely. As reinforcements arrived, they found evidence of the scale of the attack. 157 tanks had entered Ukrainian territory that morning. By sunset, over 100 of them were gone, destroyed, captured, or disabled. Ukrainian drone footage later showed the entire valley littered with blackened hulls and twisted metal. What had started as a show of force ended as a display of disaster. International analysts were stunned. How could such a massive assault fail so completely? The answer lay in preparation. For weeks, Ukrainian intelligence had intercepted communications, suggesting a major offensive. They'd fortified their defenses, mined approach routes, and rehearsed counterattacks. The Russians had walked straight into a trap, but victory came at a price. Ukrainian medics worked through the night, tending to the wounded. The smell of smoke and gunpowder hung in the air. One soldier described the silence after the battle as the loudest thing I ever heard. They had survived the impossible, but at the cost of brothers who would never return. News of the battle spread quickly across the world. Headlines read, 157 tanks lost in one day. Military experts called it one of the largest failed armored assaults of the war. Satellite images released days later showed long lines of destroyed vehicles stretching across the plain, each one a reminder of the cost of aggression. In Moscow, officials downplayed the losses, calling it a temporary setback. But intercepted reports told another story: panic, blame, and command confusion. The assault had been meant to break Ukrainian lines and open a path toward the Dnipro crossings. Instead, it had shattered one of Russia's most powerful armored units. Meanwhile, in the Ukrainian base that had stood its ground, soldiers raised their flag over the ruins. Their uniforms were soaked with mud, their faces black with soot, but their eyes burned with determination. They had faced the might of 157 tanks and lived to tell the world. Weeks later, investigators visited the battlefield. The wreckage told its own story: tanks frozen mid-charge, tracks snapped, hatches blown open. Some still bore markings of the Russian Guard units. In the distance, the Ukrainian base stood damaged, scarred, but unbroken. A drone flew overhead, capturing the scene for history: a valley of iron, a field of courage, and a reminder that numbers mean nothing when the spirit refuses to break. The soldiers who survived still tell the story differently. Some say it was luck. Others call it divine protection. But all agree on one thing that day: courage was heavier than steel. 157 tanks came. Few returned. As the sun set behind the smoke-filled horizon, the Ukrainian commander radioed a final message to headquarters: the base is secure, the attack is over. Static filled the air for a moment before the reply came through: good work, the world is watching, and they were. Because what happened that day was not just a battle. It was a message that no matter how powerful the machine, the heart of a soldier still decides the outcome. The battlefield may now be silent, but its story echoes in every headline, every photograph of burned-out tanks, every survivor's scar. The numbers will fade, the wrecks will rust, but the courage of those who stood their ground will never disappear. In the end, 157 tanks stormed into a base they thought would fall in hours. Instead, they found a wall of defiance, intelligence, and unity, and when the smoke cleared, the world saw what resilience truly looks like. Then this happened, and history was written in fire.